Hey, ain't this thing supposed to start at 7? Must be 7:30 by now. I can't stay up but so late.
You're on. I waved.
Let's get going. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to TheatreWorks' community presentation of me. It was so nice of everyone here at the theater to ask me to come by and talk to y'all. They are truly a wonderful bunch, except for that dimwit over there. I hope y'all enjoy the show, and please donate to support this wonderful organization. The link is down there, and Aunt Pearl's down to her last bottle of medicine. Also, tune in 2 weeks for our next show. What? WHAT, Celebrity Talk More or Less with Seymour Less. Now, let's have us some fun. I can tell you now that being a Southern gal, we have some wonderfully colorful expressions. I'm proud to say there's an expression for every occasion, and if a really good expression comes to you, we'll make up an occasion to get some use out of it. You know, Southern expressions convey exactly what the speaker means. You can't mistake any intent or meaning when you hear, "I'm going to jerk a knot in your tail." No daggone Yankee needs a translation for that. However, there are some other sayings you may need a translator for. No need to fret. Aunt Pearl's here to take care of that for you. Now, I was born in Texas. And if you ask me how long ago, I'm going to shoot you out no matter where you are. And I know how to track. My daddy was a Texas Ranger. Now, Texas is a special place, and Texans are a special bunch. Daddy got paid to chase bad guys, catch them, beat them up if they needed it, and occasionally shoot them. Well, most of them was bad guys. I wanted to be like my daddy, so when I got big enough, I started chasing people, beating them up if they needed it, and occasionally shooting them. Most of them was bad people. I couldn't be a ranger because I was a little girl, so I just did all that stuff. I just never got paid for it. Now, my daddy, he could give the best advice to people. He was slicker than snot on a marble. Oh, translation. That just means he was smart. See, I told y'all Aunt Pearl was here to translate. In fact, my daddy thought the best way for you to understand his advice was to yell at you. He thought he could make anybody understand him if you just talked loud enough. Now, I'm not a controversial person by nature. In fact, when someone's got the knickers in a knot, I try to avoid them altogether. Now, that's another one. It means someone is angry or upset. Anyway, when Daddy would tell me things, I would simply nod my head, agree with him, and say okay, and then I'd go and do whatever I wanted. Most of the time with my daddy, I'd keep my opinions to myself. Anyway, the most important thing he taught to teach me was bread appreciation. Yes, I said bread appreciation. Pay attention. His conversation about bread went something like this. You need to stop buying that cheap, worthless bread. It's just dyed to look like wheat. Yeah, sure it was, like the baker took the time to dye the bread. Surely my daddy wasn't one of them dumb bubbas kept throwing himself at the ground and missing. You know, the ones that only got one oar in the water, half a bubble off plumb, not playing with a full deck, one brick short of a load. But I digress. Now, where was I? Oh, yeah. Well, I kept buying the cheap bread because, after all, it was only 35 cents a loaf, and we were so poor we couldn't even pay attention. We couldn't jump over a nickel to save a dime. Not to mention we didn't have a pot to piss in, much less a window to throw it out of. You know, I couldn't believe it the day I pulled out a slice of bread and saw streaks. Yeah, I was as confused as a fart in a fan factory. My daddy was right. That no good cheap baker had dyed that bread to look like wheat. So that led me to realizing that maybe my daddy did know some stuff. Now, when I was a little girl, don't look at me like that. I was a little girl once. You think I was born old. I was the apple of my daddy's eye. I was his little princess. Well, kinda. I'm not sure my daddy really knew what a princess was. He was rougher than a cob, truth be told. But I know he loved me. I mean, he gave me my first pistol and taught me how to shoot varmints when I wasn't but 4 years old. Now, I ask you, I still have that pistol. Not too sure where I still have it, but I know I do. And I still shoot varmints with it, too. Most of them critters. Another thing Southerners like to do, as I've noted in my daddy stories, is give unsolicited advice. One time I was trying to give some advice, unprovoked, because as you all know, asking a Southerner to give advice is like setting a woodpecker loose on a tree and expecting it to peck only once. The older we get, the more outspoken we become. It's like we don't have a filter, and we feel it's our duty to tell you what's wrong with every facet of your life. Now, this friend of mine was talking about weight loss, like everyone seems to be doing nowadays, and she said she'd lost a few pounds. Well, I looked her over right good and said, well, you just look around behind you and you'll find them. Just trying to be helpful, you know. Well, I seem to have gotten off track. I was going to give you good folks some translations of the Southern vernacular. Now, we'll start with the most fun ones for me. Things that are fun to say when you're irritated. One of them is, she just gets my goose. Let me give you an example. There was this lady down the street, and she thought she was better than us. In fact, she was so stuck up she could have drowned in a rainstorm. Well, she started telling me about what was wrong with my Christmas dinner, and I don't know how she knew because she wasn't even there anyway. Well, we might as well not have even had that dinner because she just got my goose. I tell you, the old woman could start an argument in an empty house. She made my ass itch, and not in a fun way. Speaking of that, let me tell you about this guy in high school that thought he was God's gift. Fact is, he was so ugly, he didn't just get walloped with the ugly stick, the whole darn tree fell on him. He still thought the sun come up just to hear him crow. That boy's brain was on vacation, but his mouth was working overtime. And then there was these snowbirds that used to come down here for the winter. Some of them came all the way, as far away as Arkansas. When I was working down to Chuck and Puke, these snowbirds would come in loud and obnoxious and requesting exotic foods like lasagna, and then tip 2% and act like they gave you the moon. Yankees are like hemorrhoids, a pain in the butt when they come down and always a relief when they go back.
And Earl, I believe it's pronounced lasagna.
Well, who licked the red off of your candy? When I want your advice, I'll give it to you. They ain't paying you, are they? Now, back to my cousin Dickie. I was going to say he was the black sheep of the family, but he wasn't no lamb. He could tell some tall tales, though. Some of them was as much as 8% true. Took him forever to tell him that boy was slow. Here's an example. Once he and Cousin Bob were on their way to the rodeo. Well, they couldn't find it. If their brains was leather, the two of them wouldn't have had enough to saddle a June bug. Anyway, they saw this diner and they went in to get directions. Now, Dickie was a direct sort of guy, so he just went up to the counter and not paying attention to the fact that the lady behind the counter was holding her hands up in the air, a chicken wing in one pair of tongs and a hunk of brisket in the other. He just starts asking for directions, and this guy behind him says, hang on. Dickie just says, I just need directions. I won't be a second. The guy says louder, hang on, I'll tell you. Dickie turns around as the guy starts giving him directions using his gun as a pointer. See, the guy was in the middle of holding the place up. Well, Dickie finally woke up and got the picture and smelled the beans, and he and Bob hightailed it out of there. Now, when Dickie tells that story, it takes him about 20 minutes to get to the diner. Lord, by that time I'm always saying, quit going around your ass to get to your elbow. When the Lord was handing out brains, Dickie thought he said trains, and because he didn't like to travel, he passed on them. Bless his heart. One time, let's see, Dickie must have been about 65, and he got busted for smoking marijuana. Basically, he got pulled for smoking a joint in the car. I asked him what he thought he was doing, and he said, Pearl, I saw that copper coming, but my reflexes just ain't what they used to be, and I couldn't get that joint out of the car fast enough. I tried to tell the guy I was on my way to Willie's and was quality checking the appetizers, but he just didn't bite. The guy had no sense of humor. If it hadn't been for Dickie's wife, Annie, rest in peace, Annie, I'll probably be joining you shortly. I don't know what would have happened to Dickie. He was saved by the love of a good woman. Lord have mercy, it's hot in here. It's hotter than 2 rabbits screwing in a wool sack. It's hotter than a jalapeno's coochie. Can't you do something about that, or did you forget to pay the bill while you was forgetting to tell me I was on the air? Shoot, I might as well still be in Texas. When I grew up, the weather was one of 2 things. Hotter than a goat's butt in a pepper patch in the summertime, or colder than a banker's heart on foreclosure day at the widow and orphan's home. In the wintertime to boot. We get 2 days of spring and a day and a half of fall down here in Texas, yeah. Shoot, when I was a little girl, if I spit in the summer, it'd evaporate before it hit the ground. And in the winter, it'd bounce. My mama died when I was very young. So being raised by a Texas Ranger, I was never taught to cook as a child. Never learned later for that matter, and now it don't matter. Anyway, I came home from the grocery store with some canned biscuits one day. I couldn't make fresh biscuits if Martha White come to help. I had to hurry in the house before I could get the groceries out of the car. Don't you dare ask me why. Well, anyway, the phone rang while I was indisposed. But unfortunately, I got to it in time. It was Cousin Dickie. Now, I told y'all how he tends to go on and on and on. And it was hotter than blue blazes that day. By the time I got back to the car, them biscuits had popped out of whatever they can call that thing that they're in, like a cardboard corset, and had completely baked. And you know that's how I've done them ever since, at least in the summertime. You know, when I got here to your town, I was certainly surprised at how people dress. And not just at the Walmart either. This afternoon I saw this girl walking down the street. Well, I won't go so far as to call her a streetwalker, but she sure was going for that look. It was a nice little nothing she was almost wearing. She could catch the old and pneumonia and dress like that. That thing was so tight you could see Christmas, but she wasn't having no trouble attacking the fellas. They were around her like gnats at a picnic. Some of them was wearing jeans so tight you could see their religion. And the way they was talking and carrying on, the sky would have still been blue if it hadn't been raining. Those boys thought they were something, and they were, just not what they thought they were. If they had got to where they was trying to go, they wouldn't have had any better idea what to do than they did about how to get there. She had one of those boys so confused he didn't know whether to check his ass or scratch his watch. Now, I ain't saying she was a bad character. I know all about those. Let me tell you about Senator Rufus T. Hornswoggle. We were at the Brazos County Fair, and I was selling my famous Edsel biscuits. I told you about those just a few minutes ago. Senator Rufus walks up to me, and he was the guy that was all hat and no cattle. Now, if I got to explain that expression to you, so are you. He was as worthless as gum on a boot heel. Except if you wanted to talk about a little under-the-table political donation. He was on that like white on rice. Now, Senator Rufus wanted to enter the skeet shoot and came by to get some of my biscuits. He thought he was doing me a favor by buying them, and I knew good and well why he wanted them. He had the brass to suggest that I make the purchase price a donation to his campaign fund. He was worse than an old egg-sucking dog. Well, being the shy wallflower that I am, I told him I'd sooner give my biscuits to gentle Santa Anna than sell them to him. Since I am a registered voter, and there were some other registered voters listening, he couldn't answer like he wanted to. He smiled that greasy smile that only politicians and only some of them can smile, and walked away. I never found out how he did in the skeet shoot, but I know he didn't win. I did. Now, with my wins, I bought this dress. See, my husband, Earl, well, he just don't like it when I go out and buy things. So when I had my own money, I spent it on myself. It's always been my naughty thrill. Hey, you take them where you can get them nowadays. See, Earl was tight. He was tighter than Flea's ass over a rain barrel. He was so tight he wouldn't have paid a nickel to see Jesus riding a bicycle. He made sure, but he did make sure that we never went hungry. After a while, you can get used to almost anything, even armadillo. He had this way of making armadillo stew. Just clean them, turn them over, pour in some water and okra, and put it on the stove. Usually had possum pie to go with it if the roadkill smelled fresh enough. Now, I'm not saying Earl could make Lincoln scream. He was so good at pinching pennies that he could give Lincoln a Heimlich. But I loved him, and he loved me as good as he could, and we had a good run for a long time. Rest in peace, Earl. I'll be with you shortly. And that's why I'm here tonight to talk to you kind people and put up with that nitwit over there. His elevator don't go out of the basement. If his brains was dynamite, he couldn't blow his nose, bless his heart. Being here with you has made me happier than old Blue laying on the porch chewing on a big old catfish head. You folks have a swell evening and be nice to each other. Aunt Pearl's got to go whoop some sense into that fool over there and see if we got enough tips so I can get some more medicine. So click on that thingy down there and help an old woman out. Good night now.